Brady Ligon. So you might have heard of people going on gluten-free diets because of some sort of fad. Well, despite popular belief, there is actually gluten-free is associated with a disease called celiac disease. And today we will be examining the celiac disease through its medical viewpoint as well as personal and family lifestyle. So celiac disease is actually an extreme sensitivity on the gluten intolerance scale, and you have different sort of like tiers of sensitivity that you can go through. Some people are not as sensitive, but people that have celiac disease are extremely sensitive to gluten, which is something that's found in wheat and many types of grains. Um, so how exactly does the disease work? Well, as stated by Dr. Uman, a gastroenterologist for my mother, and seen through this diagram, when gluten in whatever could be bread, for example, passes through the small intestine, instead of looking like your normal gut like that, it thinks gluten is a poison, and so these things retract, and so everything is smooth along your intestine line, and that way you're actually not absorbing any nutrients. And so from that, you actually become malnourished, and on the inside of your intestines, they start to bleed. And so because of this bleeding, many doctors, when people go to get checked out, wondering what is this, what's going on, they actually get misdiagnosed with many other different types of diseases. One of the most common being anemia, but it's really just because of which anemia, by the way, is a low amount of iron in your body, and it's diagnosed as that because of the amount of blood that's coming out of the small intestine, which is caused by the gluten, not by a loss in iron. And so another thing about it is everybody has unique symptoms with celiac disease, and so that is also part of the reason why it's hard to diagnose celiac disease itself. So moving on to the personal lifestyle, the actual lifestyle of the person who has it, many of your normal carbs like bread, pasta, a lot of those, they are like completely cut out of your diet because you obviously can't have gluten, and it's this sort of like shock moment for that person, and so they have to find alternatives. And another thing that they have to watch out for is gluten is not where it could be, such as soy sauce, surprisingly. And another thing is your social interactions. So, as my mom said when she went to parties, let's put this scenario that at most parties you would think, a main thing there is food, right? Food is almost at every party. Now look at every single food and think about each one individually, which one has gluten. A lot of them actually have gluten. So it limits your choices whenever you go to parties, and it makes it hard for your social interactions in that sense. So moving on to family lifestyle, for the person's in the family that has celiac, they have to eat whatever the person with celiac eats. So let's say you want to make a spaghetti and meatball meal. Well, you have to use a special pasta. You have to use a special pasta because you don't want that person getting sick. So especially makes it difficult for when you have picky eaters in the family, because you have to find the right thing, and it just makes it even more of a mess than it already is. So another thing, according to my experience with my mother having celiac disease, is whenever we want fast food. So whenever we do, when we bring it back to the house, we have to use like completely different mats just for the gluten, and have to eat over the mat. And so once we're done with that, we have to properly like dispose of it, make sure there's no crumbs anywhere, because we don't want my mom touching it and end up getting sick. And we have to wash our hands without like touching anything, and we also have to wash the mats, but we can't dry it with the normal towels that my mom uses, because again, she would get sick. So we have to, it's a whole entire process we have to do just for getting one simple meal of fast food. And finally is medical tests. So if one person in the family has celiac, that means it most likely can run within the family. So that requires having to go get blood work pretty much every year, and they have to check it, and it's just a painful process that nobody wants to do. And so that concludes this, and I've now informed you about how celiac works in a medical viewpoint, but also through its personal and family lifestyle points. And you can now see that it is more than just a fad.